should we be measuring CLV differently in the earlier part of a season versus later in the season as the market matures and becomes more efficient? You want to be measuring CLV the same way every time. So first off, like in terms of clarifying the question, you want to be measuring it the same way. Basically, what I think, Ben's asking here is, do you weight it differently earlier? So should you be as focused on CLV earlier in the year versus later in the year? My answer to that is the market is always going to be as efficient as it is in any given moment. So even though it's more efficient at the end of the year, the difference between your price and the closing price is still going to be the best indicator of efficiency that you have. So in terms of weighting it, you could say that getting CLV at the same level later in the year or, at the end of the season is better. But also, like, in my opinion, what I would say is, like, it's going to be so marginally different that I would consider it the same way the entirety of the year. In fact, sometimes near the end of the season, which is actually a misconception here, the CLV actually means less. Oftentimes near the end of the year, sportsbooks actually reduce limits. So middle of season is really where your peak. So for MLB, like right now would probably be most efficient. Once you hit deadline, players change teams. Now you have a new level of sub-efficiency. And then near the end of the year, you really don't know what teams are tanking, what teams are going for it, especially in a sport like, for example, hockey, where Rob would know all about it. Like you really, near the end of the year, are like in more difficulty than the middle of the year in terms of like putting together the roster constructions, who's going to be playing, who's going to be out, who's shut down for the year, what teams have the motivation factors and things like that.
For me, I would say I don't measure CLV differently. Like I measure CLV the same all periods of time, regardless. However, I will say that there are different viewpoints or feelings that I have at certain points in the year. Like if the market moves against me in like week 2 of the NFL, I'm concerned. I always like to beat the market, but I don't think it's the end of the world because I think that there's so many differing opinions at the start of the year because you're very reliant on like previous year's data. There's going to be more of a divergence of people's numbers like through the first 4 weeks of the NFL season than there is going to be like in week 8, 9, or 10. And I'm not as concerned. Ultimately, I do want to beat the closing line as much as humanly possible, but for the sports I bet early on in the year, I think it's just honestly, there's more differing opinions is what it comes down to. And I'm less concerned about not beating the closing line earlier in the year than I am later in the year where we have like all these data points available to us, if you understand what I'm saying.
Okay, so you are valuing it a little bit differently.
I am, but like, so I'm valuing it differently, but I'm not measuring it differently.
Yeah, of course. And right. I think that's what Ben's asking here. So Ben, I guess Rob and I are giving kind of different answers. I'm saying, like, straight up, the impact that it will have is so marginal that it's not even worth it to like take it with a grain of salt. It's not really a big difference. I understand the ways in which it would be considered more or less valuable, but I don't think there's like a major enough of a difference to make it worth it.